Okay, hello, John Dove here from the Advocacy Club. We've just had our May session of the Legal Advocacy Club for 2023. And tonight our members have been performing the bail application. So I'm going to provide some feedback based on what I've seen tonight, both some feedback in relation to the bail application itself, and also just some general presentation feedback. So I'll start with what I've seen. So the key thing, the key point I would make is that the bail application is a lot less formulaic than a lot of other types of advocacy. So I'll compare this to mooting, for example. So mooting, where you've got sort of a skeleton argument, you stand up, sort of, may it please the court, you're referring the court to have you seen my skeleton arguments, things like that at the start. This is very different. This is a form of advocacy whereby, as you saw from the bundle, the prosecutors stood up, the prosecutors addressed the court on the offence itself and the concerns that the prosecution have in relation to bail. And your job is literally to make those oral submissions and address those concerns that you have. So it's a lot less formulaic, if I can put it that way. And I had a few people that were saying, well, I'm going to refer you to page 6 of the bundle, page 10 of the bundle. Something like this, there wouldn't be a bundle in the formal sense in the way it is, and you'd simply be responding to those oral submissions there. So at the start, what I would say is tell the court exactly what you want. Tell the court that you're applying for bail, and if it's conditional bail, tell the court at the start that you're going to be applying for conditional bail. And then pick your structure. So we had a few different types of structures that people use tonight. The good thing with this piece of advocacy is there's no one size fits all. Pick your own style and run with it. You can watch 10 lawyers and you see 10 different types of bail application. So it really is about finding your own style. One thing that I think worked quite well was a number of people in our group went through the separate concerns that the prosecution had in this particular case. And one by one, they would go through, they would address those concerns and make their submissions on that. And I think that there's two real ways that you can deal with each of those concerns. Number one is you can either say why the concern or why the opposition to bail or a specific opposition to bail has no merit. So you can say, why you don't believe that that's a genuine concern. Or alternatively, you can sort of still try and downplay that, but at the same time, address the court on what conditions you suggest could allay that fear. So what conditions could be imposed that can deal with that specific concern in relation to bail. Now, of course, one of the key concerns in this particular case was that he's likely to commit further offences. But of course, there's been a significant change of circumstances in the past couple of years for this particular defendant. Of course, he's turned his life around, he's improved his life, and he's sort of on the upward trajectory, as it were. And that's given him, as one person in my group said, it's given him real motivation not to breach those conditions, not to commit further offences. So you can sort of incorporate that into your submissions there. So that's one way that you could have dealt with that. In terms of general presentation points as well. So, of course, as with any other form of advocacy, think about the pace at which you present. So these are things that you may well have heard me talk about before, but it's no less important tonight. So, of course, speaking at a good, slow, solid pace makes you easy to follow, easy to understand, and also makes you sound a lot more authoritative on the point. Equally, you don't want to sound pretty mundane. So you're well within your rights to use intonation, you're well within your rights to change your pitch and pace to make yourself sound more interesting, because ultimately a more interesting advocate is easier to listen to, more likely to be listened to, and therefore a more persuasive advocate. So, if you've got certain points, certain good points, you can add a little bit of emphasis to those points. When it comes to the actual points themselves as well, try and keep them as simple as possible. So there's often a concern when it comes to advocacy that people think that you need to sound as sort of smart as possible. You need to be thrown in sort of colourful, flowery language. You need to use the most complex words, complex set of structures. When the reality is, that couldn't be any further from the truth, particularly with something like this, where, you need to get your point across in the most straightforward way possible. Sometimes simple language can be the best way to do this, because if you're using complex language that nobody understands, well, you're not really going to get anywhere. And moreover, it makes it more difficult for you to actually get your words out, and you've got more chance of actually tripping yourself up and making it more difficult. So simple can often be better. Less is more, as it were. There can sometimes be a tendency to want to sort of fill out the submissions with as many sort of paragraphs as possible. Get to your main points as quickly as you can. Your strongest points, try and include them as early as you possibly can in your submissions. So you don't want them hiding sort of halfway through towards the end. The strongest points, incorporate them as early as possible to try and get the court on your side. Another simple point on presentation style as well, and of course it's something I've mentioned before, comes back to reading. If you've got a script, whether it's you're appearing on a computer screen and you can be seen to be moving your eyes across, or whether you've got a piece of paper below you or to the side, that becomes obvious and it breaks the eye contact between you and your tribunal. So ultimately, you want to get to the point whereby either you've practiced that often that you know your presentation well enough that you can deliver it, or you're confident with the material such that you can present without a script. Because if you're presenting with a script, it appears a bit wooden, you've lost that rapport, and you just lose some of that air of authority. And I think lastly, we had a few people that finished within their conclusion just by reiterating some of the strongest points as well. And I think that can be a good way, just within the final sentence or two, just to reiterate some of your strongest points, and ultimately why it is that you believe your client should be granted bail. So I hope that you've found those tips helpful.